Welcome to the third part of our series, talking about how we put learners at the center of this work, specifically talking about the start of the school year. Today, we are joined with some leaders, some district leaders who are working on the ground to do this work and do it really well. So I am so excited to have you all here to dive into this discussion. I have a set of my own questions that I am eager to ask you all. But if you are an attendee, feel free to hop into the chat and post a question, and I will be sure to bring it up. But before we get started, we're going to do some introductions. My name is Kelsey Payne. I am our VP of Community Engagement. So this is what I love, bringing people together, knocking down those silos that stand between innovative work, connecting folks across the nation who are doing learner-centered innovation, and getting to connect with you all. So I'm so excited to be here, so excited to introduce our panelists. I am going to kick it over to Erik. If you want to kick us off, just introduce yourself, where you're calling in from, but also what school district you're representing, and maybe one word to describe how you're feeling about the upcoming year.
Great. Well, thank you, Kelsey. It's great to be with the amazing learner-centered leaders that we have on this panel today. My name is Erik Burmeister, and I am currently the superintendent in Menlo Park City School District, but I'm actually going to be moving on in December. So I just want to put a big shout out for my successor, Kristen Gracia, who's been our assistant superintendent for a little while, and she'll be taking over for me mid-year. And one of the great things about moving on is knowing that you sort of created this this vision that is bigger than one person, and I think that when you focus on students, that is a really important legacy that you can lead, is that it's not about you, it's about the kids and handing that on. I am calling from Great Barrington in the Berkshire Mountains today, but Menlo Park is a K-8 or PK through 8 school district in the Silicon Valley of California, and it's great to be with you today.
Great, thank you, Erik. Marlon, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Excited to be with everyone today. Marlon Styles, proud superintendent here, Middletown City School District, Southwest Ohio, home of one of the home run derby participants last night, Kyle Schwarber. He went up against the legend Albert Pujols. But excited to be here. A favorite word walking into the start of school year. I'm going to steal what we heard at ISTE Live, the word joy, bringing joy back in education. Excited to be here with everyone.
Great. Roy, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Roy Darrington. I'm the assistant superintendent, Juab School District. We're a small rural district in central Utah. And we're just trying to figure things out all the time, just trying to do better. I think one thing for me that drives me in this work is really the promise of truly connecting opportunity with potential. And I think that if we can do that for our students, then that's a win for us, and that's how we're really going to get true equity in schools. A word for me at the start of the school is always just excitement. I'm super excited to have the students back. I'm super excited to see what our teachers are going to bring back to the classroom, because you'd like them to go home and rest during the summer, but they don't. They go home and they are cranking out ideas, and just always excited to see what's back, and really excited to be part of this panel with one of my heroes out there in Middletown. I even got the same haircut.
Awesome. And I also asked someone from our learner-centered collaborative team to join. I have Rachel Riggio here. She works on our partnership, so she gets to see this work with over 150 partners across our group here. And so I brought her because I feel like she gives a really unique perspective of what's happening on the ground. So Rachel, I'm gonna kick it over to you for your last introduction.
All right, Rachel Riggio. I am calling in from very humid and hot Atlanta, Georgia. As Kelsey said, I am the VP of Tech Partnerships right now, working with multiple school districts across the nation as they try to do this work. But in my former life, before I came here, I was actually moved from the classroom up to the district to work on an investing in an innovation grant from the federal government. And I think, for lack of a better term, I was a change agent, really, and trying to work with teachers to get them to understand the learner-centered model, to get them to personalize education for students. And while it was a daunting task, it was fun. You know, it was fun to get in and work with kids and teachers and how learning could be better for those students. I think my word for this year is thrive, because I think for the last couple years, we've sort of been existing, with the pandemic and everything that we're dealing with. And not that things are back to normal, but I think I'd like to focus on helping kids, teachers, admins thrive this year instead of just exist.
Instead of just survive.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, I am so excited to have you all here. I have a bunch of questions. The first thing I always love to do is just define what learner-centered means for you. I think in different contexts, we're typically doing the same work, but we might use different words. So if we could just do a quick, what does learner-centered mean to you? Rachel, you are still on my screen for me. I'm gonna kick it right back to you.
Sure. To me, learner-centered, if we're thinking about at the district level, right down from the district to the school admins, to the teachers, to the parents, to the students, we're all thinking about and working towards students driving their learning. What's interesting to them, what's difficult for them, what's easy for them, whatever it is, they drive it. I think we see choice, we see agency, but we also see attention to students' emotional and social well-being. I think, to me, all of that embraces learner-centered education.
Yeah, absolutely. Erik, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So I think we're going to be in a vehement agreement on this one in terms of what learner-centered learning means. I really like to pay attention also to how schools are designed. And so for me, learner-centered instruction, learner-centered learning, learner-centered schools is all about designing schools and their learning experiences for the student rather than the adults. And oftentimes so much of what power schools or influences decision-making or ultimately determines what decisions we make is the needs of adults rather than the needs of kids. And it's not out of any spite for students, just because it is really difficult for us to step out of our roles as a stakeholder and enter a role as a designer. And so for me, learner-centered learning is about designing learning for students, for their needs, for the grade level and local outcomes that are necessary. It really requires a shift in how we approach getting to know our students. And it's not just about data, although data is really important, but about spending a lot of time at the beginning of the year to really get to know who it is that we're serving, and understanding that every year a different group of students walk into our spaces with different needs and expectations. And I will say that's even if it's the same exact kids who are with us the year before. They come with different needs, and it's really our responsibility to find out what those needs, desires, and hopes of those students and their parents are for the coming school year.
Marlon?
Yeah, sorry, I was just captivated by Erik's just thoughts right there. So thank you for that. How to add on to what Erik just said, besides all of that, and I really think of this as what a child or what an adult needs at any given moment to get to where they want to be at, right? So how can we slow the conversation down to focus on that notion of equity, if you want to put that tag in the conversation or not, but what does the individual need at that given moment for that point in time or any future point in time? Ultimately, I believe that learner-centered really results in this idea of a strong sense of belonging in a learning environment, in a school environment, so that the whole child can really thrive, to steal Rachel's word earlier in our conversation. So for me, it's pretty simple. How can we start to shift our thinking, change our systems, so that every child has a strong sense of belonging, no matter what environment they find themselves in, social, emotionally, academically, or even physically, whether you're putting 225 on a bench like Royd or not. We want kids to have a strong sense of belonging. That goes for a leadership perspective as well. We want our leaders to have a strong sense of belonging where all of our individuals can find their own authentic selves and really be successful and thrive in any type of environment. Yep.
Yeah, Roy, what would you like to add on to that?
Amen. And that's horrible being at the end of the line. No, I do. I would agree with everything that was said. And the only thing I could maybe add that's really important to us and really important to me personally is, Erik mentioned those outcomes that we have to get. I would push a little bit on that and talk about really focusing on redefining outcomes. We have so many outcomes that we feel like we have to achieve that are artificial outcomes that have been developed that have huge bias and inequity built into them. And they mean nothing to the individual learner. And so, what Marlon talked about really meeting the student where they're at for their definition of success and having space for them to define the outcome that is successful to them and their parents and their needs, while still providing support to help increase and enrich a vision possibly for a student or a family that may not see the potential or see the complete opportunity that's in front of them. I think that's really, if we can transform education around this idea about what does student-centered mean, we really got to get students to the center, not only in the obvious, which is to let them have more say, but let them have more say in what success and their outcomes that they want to see of themselves. That's really all I could offer to that, in addition to what's been said.
Yeah. Well, Roy, I'm happy you went last. You had a lot to add. I see all of us are nodding alongside you. So thank you for your input. I'm going to turn us a little bit to the beginning of the year. Erik, I think you said it best. Even if it's the same exact students, there is this sense of a reset or a refresh at the beginning of the year. Let's have, Roy, I'm going to have you go first this time. Why is it so important to set this tone of learner-centered at the start of the school year?
Yeah, so for us, knowing who the student is or discovering who the student is and kind of reestablishing new baselines and new goals and new expectations with the student and their parents at the beginning of the year, right off the bat, is super important. And this is something we've been working towards, really intentionally working towards. And I'm excited for this fall because I believe we have our best plan yet to date of right off the bat. We've restructured all of our parent conferences and instead of just jumping right into content, we're jumping right into getting to know our parents and our students and getting them to set goals and look at their data from last year. We've already got it put together to where we can bring it right to day one. And because I think too many times we're in the end of October, 1st of November before we're like, hey, this student needs X, Y, and Z. And we've wasted a lot of time helping that student get in front of the wave. And we're just trying to play catch up from then on. So getting to know that student right off the bat is super important.
Yeah, Rachel, do you have anything you would like to share?
Yeah, I think in the experience I have in the district, as well as watching other partners do this work, I think there is an immense need for support for teachers to be able to do this kind of work with their students. And I think at the district level or the top of the school level, if you're just a single school, we really need to come together to think about what is the best way to support teachers as they begin. Some of them are just beginning or continue this work with students. I think every teacher wants to do what's best for their students, but I don't think they always have the toolbox, the capacity to do it. So I think that's up to us to give that to them.
Yeah. Marlon?
I believe that the passion inspires and drives success, and really to slow down and think about moments where discovery can happen allows us to truly understand what big, little, kids, adults, what really hones in and really allows their passion to really start to come to light. I would hope that whether it's superintendent, the principal, principal to teacher, teacher to child, or just human to human, that we feel comfortable starting the school year off really embracing the opportunity to seek discovery for passion and what really lights individuals up. And then from there, I think the conversation is super exciting, because then we can start really looking at systemic pieces, practices, protocols to really focus in on creating environments where those passions can really start to go self-discover and explore themselves. Nothing is more exciting to see a little bitty third grader really go explore what really gets them exciting, whether that's being a firefighter on Tuesday, or a superintendent on Thursday, or a learner-centered teammate on Friday. But to have those passions really ignite and cause those creative juices to really start to really get activated is really the exciting moment. But I really centered this start of the school year on discovery of passion of individuals, and then finding joyful moments to really allow it to come to fruition.
Great. Erik.
I like Marlon, I was so entrenched in what everybody was answering that I want to make sure that I'm answering the question that was asked, which I believe was, why is it so important at the beginning of the year? Is that, and so, I echo everything that everybody said, and I hearken back to something that Marlon said in his previous answer about that, it's also the adults that we need to be concerned about being learner-centered with. And the beginning of the year is such an important time of I think, excitement and enthusiasm for our educators, that we really want to harness that this is also about their learning. And so one of the things that we do, we have 6 operating principles in our leadership team, and one of them is noise canceling focus. And what I really want to do as a leader is to give permission to our staff to stay focused on what's important and not to get distracted by the urgent. And so when we define that the important is designing our classrooms and our learning around the students and their needs, from a teacher's perspective and from a district and site leader perspective on the learning of our site staff and district staff, it gives our people permission when things like mask mandates or political board meetings or whatever come up. It gives them permission to stay focused on what's most important, because they know that the people at the district office or in the principal's office are saying, you stay focused on what's important and I'll take care of the block and tackle on what's urgent.
Yeah. Great. I've been thinking about in the webinars, we've had 3. Usually what comes up is really concrete examples. So Erik, I'm going to just continue with what you just shared, which was a really concrete example of, we set out these principles for our leaders. We say noise canceling focus. Does anyone else want to chime in? What's an example of how you're doing this at the beginning of the year? What's something someone could take away and say, oh yeah, I could try that? What's something that you feel like is working? I'm not going to kick it off. Anyone who wants to chime in.
Well, I think I'm going to jump in first, because I feel if I do it this question, then the second one I might get to go last, maybe, or won't get picked first next time. So I'll jump in real quick. I try to model, and I think everybody on here, I know Roy and Erik do the exact same thing. You try to model this idea of learner-centered leadership as much as you possibly can. So I make it a point every year when I kick off this, the boring concept of evaluations. I really try to make sure I personalize the conversation with each of the principals. Beyond that, I'm gonna make a commitment to each of them to make myself available for leadership conversations on a monthly basis, individually, where it's just the 2 of us. This is not evaluation based, but really take time early in the school year, those first 4 or 5 weeks, to really lay out what their personalized plan is for the school year that offers them that stretch factor. And not just through the standard evaluation experiences, but really on a monthly, digging into that personalized plan and finding those stretch moments and dialogue and conversation and collaboration, where my role at the table as a learner-centered leader is to push, stretch, and offer experiences and feedback that allow them to grow in the areas that are unique to them. It's not a moment on that monthly basis where the agenda is set by me. It's really driven by the school leader who really has their eyes set on a couple different areas. So yes, time intensive. Yes, we can spend time on some other things like sitting in the office doing emails and returning phone calls, but really getting out there and modeling one-on-one, offering that stretch factor and personalized conversations, really what I have found to be beneficial, and looking forward to doing that with our admin when they walk back in here sometime next week.
I agree with Marlon there with modeling is huge, and allowing the principals and teachers the opportunity to have feel that same ownership of their environment and their reality. Another thing that we do in our district is right off the bat, we have challenged, and we challenge our principals to go back with their teachers in the first days before school, and they create collective commitments based on the feedback and where they feel like they're at as a school. But those collective commitments are all focused around that personalized competency-based learning, that student-centered model that we follow in Utah. And within those, then they create their own norms. And that's been a huge buy-in piece, if you will, because those norms then become the look for that everyone uses. They whittle it down to 3 or 4 very specific things that they will guarantee across their whole building, that these things will be seen every day at every moment. You can find these in our classroom, and that's been huge. So, as far as just a functional strategy for helping to remind the adults the purpose of why we're there, that's been big for us.
So I'll add 2 things that I think have been really strategic in our work, and I don't know that at least one of them aligns necessarily to the first day or the first week or the week before school starts. But I would say that the most important piece of the learning experience that I believe that educators can really dive into to really create change in so many different areas is grading. If we can give permission either to individuals, groups of teachers, full sites, or in our case, an entire district to reimagine grading, there really is no end to the impact that those initial conversations about how we grade and evaluate students can have on the rest of the school year, and really the rest of the students' experience in our PK through 12 system. Another thing that I think is super powerful, and I don't know that it's as effective the first week of school, but certainly week 5 or 6, is shadowing a student, is assigning parents, assigning staff members, and assigning teachers, kids who are not their own, to shadow for an entire day. And that's before they come to school, all the way until they pretty much go home and go to bed, and really understanding what their experience is. And then coming back and having conversations as designers about how we design experiences for kids are either flawed or are supporting and promoting the kind of learning and experiences that we want for our kids. And so I would say those are 2 powerful pieces that we can do. And again, I don't know that they are great for the beginning of the year, but I do think, before school starts, but I do think that if you can do them and have those conversations early on in the process, it's super powerful.
Rachel, what are you seeing across your partnerships? Anything that folks are doing that you want to elevate?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a simple one. But many of the partners, of course, are instituting goal setting with students. But what I've seen in a couple of districts is teachers actually working on their own goals as a model with how to write a goal with students and kind of following the whole process along. So students are able to watch what the teacher is doing as they're doing their own goals. So it kind of just makes it a little you have better conversations that way, and you connect with your students that way. So that's something that I've seen that I was really impressed by. And this shadowing a student thing is interesting. Yeah, I'd love to see that in action, because you really get then the perspective
Mhm.
of that student and what they need at any given time. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, great. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about impact. So, you shared that either you're, in the process of shifting to learner-centered, whether it's ever a process that ever ends, or you're in motion and you're growing and everyone is, dipping their toe in the water. I saw a question come up here of, what are some of those positive outcomes in your district because of learner-centered teaching and learning? You know, Oftentimes the first question I get is around data and grading. So Erik, I love that you just kind of named that of like, and Roy, like outcomes and grading, but maybe we could touch on that, but also just like, what are some of these other impacts that you're seeing with your learners, your families, your community, as you've made these shifts? I don't have to pick. Anyone want to go first? Sorry, Marlon.
I'll jump in because we're kind of in the middle of a lot of these conversations, and the idea of outcomes. So to answer the question, I'm going to relate it back to kind of perspective of stakeholder, and our job really to inform and educate our stakeholders to what we're trying to do as a district, to give them permission to come to us with their expectations of their success. Creating that environment is difficult, and there's no end to the amount of communication to try to help inform your community. And as soon as they understand the ownership they have and the reality that they can come in and say, hey, this is what I want for my child, or this is what I want as a learner, this is really what I need, and you're really going to do that for me, you're going to provide opportunity for me, they're 100% in, and they see the wins across the board. It's a little more difficult when you look at the traditional metrics of success in a school, or targets of success in a school, and the traditional understanding of what success looks like for a student in a school. And that parent is looking at some of the opportunities being provided, and the freedom that their student has to engage. And they actually are a little, it makes them uneasy because they don't understand how to navigate or exist in this environment that has a lot of freedom and flexibility for their individual student. They want the structure, they want just chase a straight ACT score, or whatever it might be that's important to them. And yet that's really not what the system necessarily is designed to do. For it could be, but most students and most parents, when it's all said and done, they really actually, that's not their first priority. They have 7 or 8 priorities that always trump high test scores in the traditional way we measure them. So how are we capturing data and results in a way that we can then inform our stakeholders, this is how we're doing, or how your child's doing at developing some of those social emotional skills, or engaging in creativity, or design thinking, communication or collaboration, some of those things that are actually really more outcomes. They just don't recognize them in a way that they haven't traditionally been measured in any way. And so helping to connect the process and communicate that with our stakeholders is the biggest challenge. But once it's there, they're 100% on board.
Yeah, I thank you, Roy, for saying that. And I think I'm gonna make a statement about outcomes, of what I think it is an example of being learner-centered, a benefit of being learner-centered, or evidence of being learner-centered. And I don't mean this to be a political statement, but my school district is in a state that found it very difficult to get reopened to in-person instruction during COVID. And our district was the first district in the state of California in September of 2020 to reopen to in-person instruction. And I get asked a lot, how was that possible in Menlo Park when it wasn't possible in so many other places? And, and I think it harkens back to many things, but one of the things that it harkens back to is that our staff were used to having the conversation of what is it that kids need? And kids need to be back in school. We knew that, we saw that on every screen that we saw every day. And so they moved heaven and earth to make it happen. And I think that when a school district is in the place of consistently putting the needs and the learning of students before everything else, not that everything else isn't important, but that when we put it ahead of everything else, then that's what starts the conversation rather than it being an afterthought at the end of the conversation. And so for us, I think a huge outcome was we did whatever we could to get students back, because it was clear that the kind of experiences, both personally, social, emotionally, and academically, that they were having virtually was falling way short of what we expected our students to be able to have access to. And I attribute a big part of that to having been meaningfully learner-centered for quite some time, so that we could keep the students as the center of the conversation and not the noise of the politics outside.
Here in Middletown, I'm gonna go student route here. We've really on board in the district with this idea of our passport to tomorrow. I won't spend 60 minutes breaking it down like we do in other conversations. But for us, it's this idea of offering an environment where students are welcome to explore and specialize depending on how they're feeling in that given moment regarding their passions. The ultimate impact, to get back to the question, off of exploration and specializations, is for kids at the end of the day to have a very strong sense of what they're good at and what they can dominate at and what they know is just not in their wheelhouse, right? That is the biggest source of impact for me in our district as we think about our children. We want our kids to know that these 8 or 9 different skill sets, wheelhouse. I'm gonna rock them any day, no matter the environment, circumstance, I'm gonna kill it, right? We want them to know that these 2 or 3 areas right there is just not my sweet spot. It's not my secret sauce. I don't even dibble or dabble in it because it's just not who I am, and I'm not comfortable in that environment. So for us, we want to create environments that offer that exploration, specialization. At the end of the day, the greatest impact, as I said before, is you knowing the skill sets that you possess, no matter what career field or cluster you land in, or what you want to be when you grow up. But you know that in order for you to thrive and be your authentic self, you've got confidence and you can articulate each of those areas with precision. No matter whether you are 5 years old in kindergarten or you're walking across the stage as an 18-year-old that just graduated.
And Marlon, to that point, I think so often about what Devin often speaks about is it makes the learning feel more relevant. And I know, like, my own experience in school, I probably wasn't the most well-behaved learner because it felt so irrelevant to me. If someone came to me and said, here's what you're really good at, and here's how you can hone in on these things, I just saw everything. You know, I was a dancer, I was a performer outside of school. Then I would come to school and there was no connection between like who I was outside and who I was within the walls of the schools that I went to. And, you know, when I think about the question about like behavior, when I was teaching first grade, it's just, how does this stuff that's happening in the world or within myself feel relevant in all spaces? And so when I hear you talk about, gosh, I just wish I had that list. I wish I do. I wish I had someone that said to me, here are the things you're really good at. Here are the things that like you possess that are going to make you, I think what you just said, what did you say? Like unstoppable, or you used a word that I got really excited about. But yeah, for me, when the greatest impact is when learning doesn't feel irrelevant, I think is really, really, really important. Sorry, Rachel, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to share a little bit about what I was thinking.
Just to throw one last thing in there real quick for Rachel before you go, but if you don't mind, is what if it wasn't someone telling you that?
Yeah.
What if you knew that based, right? You already know I'm gonna say, I'm gonna go back on mute.
Right. No, you don't have to go on mute. We don't have to be on mute.
I think for me, and this is personally as well as what I'm seeing out there, this, look toward learner centered has allowed us to sort of put our lens on equity and inclusion. When I was in the classroom, I thought I was being inclusive and I was providing equity, but in some of the things that I've learned and what I'm watching partners do, I'm thinking, wow, I did have that bias, or I need to do something about this bias. So I think we're very early in the stages of really looking at this, but I think this movement has kind of forced us to look through the equity and inclusion lens, for sure. And for me personally, and for a lot of the partners that I work with.
Yeah. And Kelsey, in the spirit of the no mute button, I just want to echo something that you said, and that Marlon was saying too, is that so much of school is designed around obedience rather than learning. And part of the reason why it was irrelevant, and part of the reason that it was irrelevant is because nobody asked you, right? You didn't have voice choice. You didn't have agency, right? And one of the things that we see in schools that are truly where the learning is learner centered is that there are far fewer obedience issues, far fewer discipline issues, far fewer control issues, far fewer attendance issues, because students feel valued, they feel heard, they feel seen, and learning is relevant, even if it's I don't love learning about slope or whatever the topic is. They know that they have a voice, right? That they can say, this is hard for me, or that, I didn't have breakfast today, and so I'm struggling. And when we design classrooms in a way where there is that voice, we have the added benefit of it being truly a community of learners rather than this relationship of control between the adult and the students. And when we remove that obedience factor, we then sort of rise to the level of, thank you, Marlon. I saw that reference in the chat there. We all take care of each other, that this is a space that we created together, and this is a space that we hold true to together. And kids feel much safer in a space where they feel heard. And when learning is designed around them, you don't have a lot of these battles that you hear, especially now, about kids have come unglued. Well, of course they've come unglued. We're all unglued. And if we just focus on obedience, not only are we not learner-centered, but we're going to see a huge uptick in discipline issues and attendance issues. And so the benefits of this are, numerous.
Yeah, I agree, Eric, and Marlon, you both touched on what I think is this kind of delicate dance between the relationship between the learning facilitator, the teacher, and the learner and the learning environment. And that is, to Marlon's point about students knowing who they are. And then to Eric's point about taking that one step farther and being able to articulate who they are and know that they're going to have support in becoming who they want to be. I think where we traditionally have had problems in the teacher-centered model of education is we try to tell students who they are and convince them that that's who they are, and that then they reciprocate that in, I can't do the things I'm not good at, versus I know I'm not as strong in area X, Y, or Z as I am in A, B, and C, but I know that if I want to be strong in those areas, I can be, and there's an environment that will support me to engage that, versus just shutting down, being frustrated, convincing themselves. I often use the analogy of a kindergartner versus a second grader. I've never met a kindergartner that didn't believe they could do anything in the world. But I know a lot of second graders that have learned, that we've taught, they're not good at math. They can't read very well. And how horrible is that we unintentionally created a system that taught kids that they couldn't do something, versus building confidence in a student and supporting them in a way that they know they can do anything. Because can we graduate the same potential that a kindergartner feels in every one of our 12th graders? That'd be amazing.
Yeah, Roy, you should write a book or make a shirt off
Yes, for
last
sure.
line.
I
That is
love it.
beautiful, man.
Yeah,
That
I
is
love it.
beautiful. It gets me thinking about um, what if instead of job fairs or career days, what if a group of female students who knew that their strength lied in a certain area that led them to this desire to want to be engineers? What if 9 female engineers walked into an environment and met with just those kids alone, right? What if a group of young Black males discovered themselves and a group of 9 Black males who were in the field of finance walk in and allow them to electrify their passion, right? What if? So, Roy, I think you just absolutely nailed, and I think that's something we gotta put on a T-shirt somehow.
I'd
Write a
wear
book.
it. I would wear it.
I love that. All right, well, the last question I have for you all is, it builds off of some of your lessons learned. You all have been in this work. This work is challenging. It's not easy. And my hope is that if anyone watches this webinar or gets to hear from you all, is that they walk away with a little bit of advice of, this is this thing I tried, this is something I learned, or a lesson learned that really propelled you forward in this work. So if you could just share, what advice would you have for others who are starting to shift to more learner-centered practices?
I'll jump in. Service, right? We're in the business of service. And if you are in a leadership position, take titles off, superintendent, teacher, we're all leadership positions. But our obligation is to serve others. The only way to truly and honestly and heartfelt serve others is to not make it about you. To really enjoy finding what makes people happy, what gets people up in the morning, what keeps people up at night, really getting to know people and understand where they want to end up 30 days from now, 3 years from now, when they graduate or at the end of their career. That's true service. And going to your whiteboards and really shaking things up so that the system works to serve those who you've been called to serve. That's my biggest lesson learned. 15 years ago, I'm losing some hair up here, Roy. I know you said we look alike, but I'm a little far advanced to you. 15 years ago, I discovered that, it's not about your ideas. It's about their needs, and really slowing down to take time to get close to those that you serve, and authentically listen and observe and really capture what they need. And then go back to the lab and come up with those true ways to serve them is truly exciting. And the last thing I'll say also is decision-making tables. There should be multiple seats at those tables if you truly want to serve. And it should include some of those folks you're close to.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in right there because Marlon is really speaking my language there, as far as it is about the learners. And it's really not as complicated as people want it to be. If you can give yourself and your environment the permission to ignore everything that we've unfortunately learned about how it should be, and come back and really just focus on what is the needs of each child, and do I have an environment that I can meet the needs of each child? Because when we stop, and a couple words that Marlon said it numerous times, slow down, and we focus on the child, it's easy. We do this all the time. We know the children and their needs in our building. We have lots of ways to figure that out. I think the hard part is knowing isn't enough. We know, and then we're frustrated because we don't have the time, we don't have the resources, we don't have the structure, we don't have the system, we don't have the purpose or the intentionality to meet those needs. And that's setting ourselves up for a loss and for frustration. And so slowing down and then just evaluating your system and being open and honest enough to say, we commit to removing any barriers that allow us to do what's right for each child. And if you can do that, it's a really simple thing to say, and it's really a simple thing to do if you commit to it. And to Erik's point, just live in that real tight focus. Just forget the noise. I love that what he said there, you know, forget the noise and all the distraction. If that's what you really believe, then believe it. Figuring out how to do it. I think you could ask all your partner schools. There's 150,000 different ways to accomplish this work. You just have to believe that you want to do it and commit to doing it and focus in on what are you trying to do, and that is meet the needs of each child.
Yeah, great words for my colleagues here. It's always an honor to be on these panels and listen to other people and realize how much, you know, we still have left to learn as individuals, and I'm always inspired by them. You know, if I'm giving advice to somebody, I would say, you know, two things. The shadow a student is really key. You know, a lot of times we assume we know what those obstacles are, and oftentimes we don't know. I remember one of the most powerful experiences I had as a superintendent was, you know, I was really frustrated with the inability of our math interventions to really make the change that were necessary. And so I sat for an hour with a group of 8th graders in our school district who were in a math intervention class. And I said, tell me everything, tell me where it went wrong, tell me where. And almost to a kid, they said 3rd grade. Like every kid could tell you exactly where it went wrong, quote unquote. And it wasn't even about that, you know, it was about how they felt about math. It was about how they perceived themselves in relationship to math. And they talked eloquently. You know, these are, you know, 13, 14-year-olds who we think only care about TikTok and, you know, all of these other things, who could articulately tell you where things went wrong for them in math and what they would do differently if they could, you know, and it dramatically changed how I approached math intervention from then forward. And I just can't say enough about the importance of going to the kid. Go to the student and ask them, shadow them, live their life, understand what it's like to have 7 different bosses for 45 minutes a day, get 30 minutes of homework for each of those things, 7 different expectations about how things are supposed to be turned in and assessed and what's graded and what's not graded. And I mean, it's mind-boggling what we put our kids through sometimes. And then we view it from a lens of the adult or our experience 30, 40 years ago in school, and shadowing them and going to the source is really the most powerful thing that we can do as educators to really change that. And then the last thing I would say for a piece of advice is that emotions play such an important part in how we relate to our colleagues and how kids relate to one another and adults and vice versa. I would read Mark Brackett's book, Permission to Feel, and really begin to think about how we can create not just places where we're focused on IQ, but create places where we're focused on EQ as well. And so those would be 2 pieces of advice I would give people.
I think I have 2. Right from the beginning, when I was a brand new teacher, all the way up to now, I think relationships are everything. Relationships with the students, relationships with parents, with other teachers, with admins, superintendents. I just think relationships are everything. You get to know the people and the job becomes a lot more fulfilling. I'm not going to say easier because it's always difficult, but a lot more fulfilling. And then I think my second piece of advice comes from working with partners and implementing technology and, you know, frameworks and all these things. Allow yourself to sit in the uncomfortable and kind of just let it wash over you, sit in the uncomfortable, and then begin to process that, because this is sometimes uncomfortable, messy work. And if you just are confident sitting in the uncomfortable for a while, you'll figure it out and it will become more comfortable as you go.
Wow. I don't want this time to end, but I do think we should wrap up so we can all go build relationships, go enjoy maybe a little bit of summer, go get ready for the start of a school year. But I just need to share a huge dose of gratitude to you all. I'm leaving really inspired. I so appreciate you all taking the time to connect. And I hope we get to do this again. This was awesome. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your insights. Does anyone want to share any last words? I always feel bad just like cutting it off. Anyone want to share anything before we leave?
I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning just real fast. And I'm taking this from ISTE Live, the keynote from the CEO, Richard. He said this year we need to return joy to education. So let's turn the page, get past COVID. Let's get over what happened and let's start returning some joy back to the learning environment for the adults and the kids. Time to have some fun. Let's go.
Awesome. All right, well, with that, let's close out. Oh, Erik, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say amen to that. And thank you to the Learner Center Collaborative. You guys are an incredible partner, and anybody who's interested in walking on this journey, you couldn't find a better partner than the folks there at the Learner Center Collaborative that you are a part of. And I just want to thank you for inviting us, and so much of the journey that I think all of us have had as educators, as leaders, and in our systems is because of partnerships with folks like you. So thanks, Kelsey.
Thanks, Erik.
Yes, thank you.